Welcome to Module 4, Work with Requirements for Microsoft Power Platform and Dynamics 365. This module is part of the Architect Solutions for Dynamics 365 and Microsoft Power Platform learning path. Let's get started. Welcome to this module, Work with Requirements for Microsoft Power Platform and Dynamics 365. Introduction. This module explains how to work with requirements. You have successfully progressed past the pre-sales phase and are now moving forward with your project. Depending on the exact methodology that you choose to use, you might revisit working with requirements in each sprint or iteration. Frequently, this module will stay methodology agnostic and focus on how to collect and work with requirements.
Welcome to our Business Application Solution Architect module on working with requirements. As a solution architect, you will likely be the one leading the discovery meetings. You'll be asking the thought-provoking question to determine the path forward for a successful solution. It's important to ask open-ended questions, avoid those yes and no type questions. When we ask the open-ended questions, we get more of the details, more of the why, so we can architect the right solution. As we ask questions, we should be mindful of what we ask does not accidentally offer solutions, just the questions. Solutioning should happen, but let the solutions come from the customer's answers, not our questions. When you manage the workshops where you are gathering the requirements, be mindful of the stakeholders, all of the stakeholders. The stakeholders will be from all levels of the organization. We will see many collections of users and managers across the hierarchy of large organizations, as well as peer groups across departments. Each will likely have different system needs and often overlapping and even conflicting requirements. It's vital to have an understanding of how we can best address the majority of needs and what types of accommodations should we be making for the exceptions. Are we addressing these exceptions with a separate application, a new screen, or maybe just solid user training plans? How we address those exceptions versus the main requirements can make or break user adoption. As we move through this module, we'll learn about different types of requirements and requirements gathering, all of this to allow us to build a successful solution for our customer.
In this module, you will learn about leading requirements gathering workshops, differentiating between functional and non-functional requirements, confirming and finalizing requirements. Introducing your customer. This module refers to the customer, Woodgrove Bank, and the exercises and discussions throughout the lesson relate to this customer and how you can help them. Woodgrove Bank has offices in 14 US states, in addition to an office in the UK and another in Germany. Woodgrove Bank is a leading global financial services provider with an emphasis on commercial lending and investments. Administrative users work in the office and are never mobile. However, all mid-level managers need to be able to work from their home offices or while on site with a client. The team at Woodgrove feels overwhelmed with their disparate systems. Therefore, they are looking for a solution that connects their data in a way that boosts financial success and customer satisfaction. With an internal-facing only deployment, Woodgrove Bank would have fewer regulatory concerns. However, each team with the bank would have their own responsibilities. The following table describes Woodgrove Bank's customer-facing teams: business, growth and asset management. Commercial accounts with less than USD 1 billion in annual transactions. Growth in this sense refers to the loans that are used to reinvest in the corporation. These customers share a group of account managers. They are not specifically assigned to an individual. Fortune 500. Each customer in this division is assigned a senior account manager as their primary contact for all banking matters. When a company is managed in this division, it remains here, even if it rolls off the Fortune 500. Group portfolio management. This team manages the parent-child accounts under a common umbrella for firms with multiple organizations. New business development. This division is primarily marketing for new business. When an account is qualified and active, it moves on to the appropriate management team. Public sector, government, or higher education. Woodgrove Bank is a preferred lender to many sovereign governments around the globe and to private universities. This team also tends to the high-volume, non-profit organizations that are serviced by the bank. Consumer lending. This team is the smallest because Woodgrove focuses on commercial products. However, High volume consumer lending is available on a case-by-case basis. This team is not advertised to external prospects, but is mostly used by the executives of corporate clients. Relationship managers. This team consists of members of each of the other teams, which ensures a consistent experience because accounts might move between teams and interact in other ways. This team also establishes best practices for users. Escalation call center. The bank runs an all-day, everyday call center. They have a 5-person team, 1 manager and 4 customer service representatives in each of their locations: Chicago, Frankfurt, and 2 teams in an outsourced center in Manila, the Philippines, who work an early and late shift to cover the Asia-Pacific APAC region. In addition to these teams, Woodgrove Bank has a standard set of C-suite executives who are involved with overall bank operations and supporting the teams as needed. Woodgrove Bank is hoping to have the new system in a pilot phase so that the CEO can present initial results to the annual general meeting, AGM, in 4 months' time. Next unit, lead requirement capture sessions. Lead requirement capture sessions. The solution architect commonly leads the requirements capture sessions. The goal of these sessions is to develop the high-level needs into implementable requirements. If the same solution architect was involved during the pre-sales phase, they might already understand the customer needs and success factors. Otherwise, the solution architect should ensure that they are well informed prior to the first session. The information should be used to drive the discussion with the attendees. As you gain more experience driving these meetings, you will adopt a preferred methodology. Be prepared to fluctuate with the needs of any particular project or customer. Arrive to these sessions with a plan, templates, and desired results. However, avoid being so rigid that it stifles conversation, creativity, and solutions. What a requirement looks like. The specific way that a project documents a requirement can be specific to a chosen methodology. However, in all cases, requirements should capture who, what, and why. These parameters can be captured in user stories, or they can be line item requirements, but they should be testable and accountable. A good requirement keeps the following factors in mind: who needs the requirement, what the customer needs, why the customer does what they do. Larger requirements or stories need to be broken down into manageable parts. Different methodologies use different terms for these parts. For example, agile approaches typically call them epics. Regardless of the name, the solution architect needs to be vigilant to ensure that this process happens. Prioritization. Every project has a limited amount of time and resources that can be applied to implement requirements. The solution architect, along with the project team and often the customer, needs to prioritize the requirement list or backlog. Because business application projects lend themselves well to incremental deployments, teams often first prioritize a minimum viable product, MVP. An MVP identifies the requirements that need to be completed to initially go live. Then, the remaining items fall to future iterations or sprints. The solution architect should use the identified key business objectives to evaluate the requirements. Priority should be given to the requirements that help meet the objectives. This approach can also help identify a disconnect with the key objectives if you identify a requirement that is clearly important but doesn't help achieve the key objectives. Feasibility. The solution architect should evaluate requirements to ensure that they are feasible. Look for requirements that, while appealing, aren't achievable for a number of reasons, such as those that require data that you don't have, updates of other systems that aren't possible in the time frame. A good question that the solution architect can ask themselves: is there anything that would prevent these requirements from getting done? Manage attendees. Expectations should be set ahead of the session to ensure that the right people attend. You want to make sure that you have experienced people who understand the target areas. Having multiple, smaller and shorter sessions can be more targeted and productive. Inviting different people to handle different parts of a process is valuable because it helps you get a full picture of how that part of the process works. Often this approach will save you from having to follow up to fill in the missing pieces of how something works. Inviting management to attend can be helpful because you often receive more decisive information. However, keep in mind that a senior manager's presence can have an effect on their staff's willingness to participate. In many cases, their staff will be quieter and will defer to the manager for answers to avoid misspeaking. If you find that scenario happening in a negative way, you might have to address it either by following up separately or by asking the manager not to attend at all the sessions. Pre-work before sessions. Prior to the session, the solution architect should try to get as much information as possible on the current solution and its processes. This information can be studied ahead of time to help formulate questions that can be used to keep the discussions moving. Preparation can also help those in attendance gather documents and examples that they can bring to the sessions. Also, remember to gather what the pre-sales team collected. Avoid making customers start over and repeat the same information that was already discussed. Determine whether any demo recordings were made to help you become more well-informed. Drive toward requirement clarity. Often the initial requirement statement by a business user won't be the real requirement. It will take investigative work by the solution architect to guide the user or communication with others to get to the real requirement. The solution architect must learn how to ask why, without upsetting the user or making it appear as if the user is inept at doing their job. The real reason for the question is for understanding the core problem so that the best solution can be designed. Having common questions ready can help you extract information. Can you go through a day in the life of that process? Who else is involved in this process? Where does that information come from? Can you help me understand why that process is needed? If you start with open-ended questions to get to the real requirements and needs, you can work towards a yes or no question to confirm your understanding. The following example is a simple exchange between a solution architect, SA, and a business user. User: we need a printed report of all expired transactions in the last 30 days. SA: who uses the report? User: it's used by managers. SA: manager: how do you use the report? Does it have to be a report? Or is the real ask simply to see the expired transactions for the last month? Manager: we only look at the report once a month, so that would be fine. SA: what do you look for when you review the data? Manager: we look for any transaction that was over $50,000, and then we do a deeper review on those. SA: so would it be helpful if the system only presented expired transactions over $50,000 for review? Manager: yes, that would be great. This results in a revised requirement. Managers need to review expired transactions over $50,000 monthly. You can see if the solution architect hadn't inquired enough, the team would have created a paper report. Always ask why, and get to a point where you feel that you truly understand the need. Resolve conflicting requirements. Frequently, different business users will create requirements that are conflicting. It's essential that the customer has someone who is decisive. The solution architect can help guide the parties toward a conclusion by offering ideas and compromises. However, they shouldn't get involved in corporate politics. Stand up for your perspective. A solution architect needs to be good at respectfully pushing back on requirements. Part of this responsibility is being able to clearly communicate the solution vision that you came up with and helping the customer see how this vision helps achieve their goals. New solution architects often get into trouble at this stage by coming across as condescending. Make sure that when leading the customer toward your vision that you avoid being dismissive of their ideas. Exercise. Plan your requirements capture sessions. Review Woodgrove Bank's teams. Determine which of these teams you would group together for requirements gathering. Decide which teams you would not group together for requirements gathering. Explain why you would make these decisions. Next unit. Identify functional requirements. Identify functional requirements. Requirements are commonly referred to as either functional or non-functional. Functional requirements describe what the solution needs to do or its behaviors, and non-functional requirements commonly describe non-behavior aspects of the solution, such as a performance requirement. This topic covers consideration for functional requirements. Each functional requirement should clearly capture the who, what, and why of the requirement. If the requirement is too large, it should be divided into smaller parts. Example functional requirements. The following scenarios describe simple examples of functional requirements. As a sales user, I need to be able to close an opportunity as lost and then capture why it is lost so that we can improve our sales tactics in the future. As a sales manager, I need to be able to approve a discount on a quote so that I can reduce the total price and give a discount to the customer. As a staff accountant, I want to be prevented from closing a batch that has pending items so that I don't have to reopen it later. These situations communicate the who, what, and why of the requirement. The following examples are poorly worded requirements. Opportunities can be won or lost. Price should reflect discounts. From the batch item list, selecting the Close Batch button, which is the third button from the left, should close the batch if no items exist that would stop it from happening. When you are gathering requirements of any variety, it is helpful to map towards process rather than simply listing features and functions. Build a story for users and describe how they will successfully use the system that you are designing. You can write or draw on a whiteboard, use a tool to diagram a process, or use whatever methods will work for your team at the planning stage that you are in. Your team will dissect the pieces into smaller, actionable items later. Acceptance criteria. It is important to have a clear understanding of how a requirement is considered satisfied. Often, documenting satisfaction will help determine if the requirement is detailed enough and is the right size. This approach is also helpful for testing teams when they're evaluating the implementation of the requirement. Finally, the requirement satisfaction should be reviewed with the stakeholder to ensure that it is accurate, because it can be used to help prevent scope creep. The solution architect needs to look for acceptance criteria that can't possibly be met and then negotiate to reach a compromise that is achievable. Capture exceptions. Typically, a simple requirement, like closing a transaction, might have a straightforward path and only a few exception paths. Make sure that you look for and identify these exceptions when capturing the solution path. As you move into design, you want to design primarily for exceptions. They should be handled as such. But if you do not know that they exist, you will have to rework the design later. Additionally, remember to capture how frequent the exception occurs, because some exceptions are best handled by procedure and/or process and not software customization. Avoid scope creep. Left unchecked, every project would add scope from what was envisioned and budgeted for. The solution architect must be vigilant in looking for requirements that are out of scope from the original assumptions. The project governance process should be used to evaluate how to handle these after they've been identified. Often, those out-of-scope requirements that are accepted for inclusion might result in a change order, depending on the project's contractual structure. Ignoring the fact that the scope is increasing can easily result in project failure. Exercise. Find the functional requirements. Review Woodgrove Bank's teams and identify likely overlap between the teams in functionality that they will need to do their work. Business growth and asset management. Commercial accounts with less than $1 billion in annual transactions. Growth in this sense refers to the loans that are used to reinvent the corporation. These customers share a group of account managers and they are not assigned to an individual. Fortune 500. Each customer in this division is assigned a senior account manager as their primary contact for all banking matters. When a company is managed in this division, they remain here even if they roll off the Fortune 500. Group portfolio management. This team manages the parent-child accounts under a common umbrella for firms with multiple organizations. New business development. This division is primarily marketing for new business. When an account is qualified and active, it moves on to the appropriate management team. Public sector, government, and higher education. Woodgrove Bank is a preferred lender to many sovereign governments around the globe and to private universities. This team also tends to the handful of high-volume, non-profit organisations that are serviced by the bank. Consumer lending. This team is the smallest because Woodgrove focuses on commercial products. However, High volume consumer lending is available on a case-by-case basis. This team is not advertised to external prospects, but mostly used by the executives of corporate clients. Relationship managers. This team consists of members of each of the other teams, which ensures a consistent experience because accounts might move between teams and interact in other ways. This team also establishes best practice for users. Next unit. Identify non-functional requirements. Identify non-functional requirements. Requirements are commonly referred to as either functional or non-functional. Functional requirements describe what the solution needs to do or its behaviours, and non-functional requirements describe non-behaviour aspects of the solution, such as performance requirements. This topic covers considerations for non-functional requirements. Frequently, non-functional requirements might have dependencies on factors that are out of your control, such as age of computers, network bandwidth, network firewall and internet security software, and compliance officers. Accordingly, you need to identify any factors that might impact your ability to address the dependencies, or dependencies might exist that could risk your delivery schedule. If the customer needs to replace hardware, delays would likely occur. If the customer has legacy applications that require an older browser and they can't use modern browsers, your performance goals will be impacted. The goal is to identify these issues early in the project. If not addressed up front, you risk the customer perceiving that the application is defective. Additionally, this situation frequently necessitates having a technical discovery session with the client's IT team. It is best not to overwhelm the business with deep technical discussions. Non-functional requirements capture the elements that users might not directly care about, but are important to support the proposed architecture and operational viability of the solution. Non-functional requirements often influence user adoption and perceived satisfaction with the solution. As with functional requirements, non-functional should be prioritized and can be delivered incrementally. Examples of common non-functional requirements types include availability, compliance and regulatory, data retention and residency, performance, response time, and so on, privacy, recovery time, security, scalability. This list is not exhaustive. Non-functional requirements examples. The following examples are of well-composed non-functional requirements. Average screen load time for internal users that are not mobile will be less than 3 seconds. External portal must be able to handle 100 concurrent users who are performing case submissions. The following examples are of poorly worded non-functional requirements. All screens in the app should load as fast as possible. External portal must be able to handle peak traffic. System must be recoverable after a disaster. Feasibility. While all requirements should be feasible, non-functional requirements are often more specific. Therefore, extra consideration to the realities of budget and resources is appropriate. For example, specifying 99.999% availability when the core app availability is 99.9% isn't realistic. Additionally, it is possible to specify a requirement that is achievable with enough budget but not have budget to meet the requirement. Measure compliance. When a non-functional requirement involves a measurement, it should specify how it will be measured and compared for compliance. For example, if you have a 3-second form load time requirement, determine whether it's for an on-campus only or if it includes mobile users. Exercise. Find the non-functional requirements. Review the list of non-functional requirement types: availability, compliance and regulatory, data retention and residency, performance, response time and so on, privacy, recovery time, security, scalability. Determine which of these non-functional requirements will likely be of concern to Woodgrove Bank. Consider what type of concerns you could anticipate and how you might address those concerns. Assess whether any other concerns might exist that you haven't yet thought of. Next unit. Confirm and finalize requirements. Confirm and finalize requirements. After requirement collection has been completed for this sprint or iteration, or whole project high-level planning, the solution architect should review the requirements. This step is in addition to processing notes promptly after a customer workshop to avoid forgetting the relevance of your cryptic notes. The purpose of this review is to reflect on all the requirements that are going into the build effort. To thoroughly review the requirements, the solution architect should ask themselves the following questions. Are the requirements complete? Who needs the requirements and why do they need them? Is the estimate adequate? Did details change or are any revisions required? Is the priority correct? Does the priority seem like it's too low or too high? Is everything in scope? Was a requirement overlooked that could be included in the defined scope? Have the requirements mapped to business objectives? How can requirements that don't map be dealt with? Have the stakeholders reached an agreement on the plan? Does a roadmap to the next iteration exist? Is there a roadmap for the entire solution? Next unit, check your knowledge. Check your knowledge. Answer the following questions to see what you learned. Which of the following options is considered a functional requirement? Any credit card number that is used can't be stored in the Microsoft Dataverse environment. Average screen load time for internal users that aren't mobile will be less than 3 seconds. As a staff accountant, I want to be prevented from closing a batch that has pending items so that I don't have to reopen it. I'm going to select that one. Which of the following options is considered a non-functional requirement? External portal must handle 100 concurrent users who are performing case submissions. As a sales user, I need to be able to close an opportunity as lost and capture why it was lost so that we can improve our sales tactics in the future. As a sales manager, I need to approve a discount on a quote so that I can reduce the total price and give a discount to the customer. I'm going to select the first one. What types of questions are best for gathering requirements from customer meetings? Open-ended, yes, no, multiple choice. I'm going to say open-ended. And here's the answers. Let's have a look at the summary. Summary. Collecting implementable requirements is essential to project success. This module explained how to be effective at leading the collection effort. This effort can involve working with all levels of customer organizations and helping to cut through any barriers to get a clear and concise specification of the need. The solution architect helps keep the conversation focused on the need rather than supporting the notion that the customer's current process is the only viable solution to consider. Key points from this module include: the solution architect leads requirements collection sessions with the customer's subject matter experts. The solution architect must be an excellent listener and use open-ended questions to drive towards clear requirements. When possible, it's best to avoid solving how the need will be implemented and focus on what the business need is instead. Both functional and non-functional requirements are important. Getting the requirements right is only one step in the process. From requirements, you move into solution planning, tasks, implementation, maintenance, and more. Getting the requirements right early in the process and being agile along the life of a project will give you a better path to success. You've now completed this module. I hope you found this Audio Learn series useful. If you did, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. If you want to hear more audio learning from Microsoft Learn's learning paths, leave a comment on what you'd like to hear next. Thanks for watching.